Welcome to another episode of Phrasally Verbocious. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Chris.
And how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Nice and sunny Spain summer weather.
It's what I love about living here. So today we're going to talk about technology in the classroom. Alan, is technology always electrical things?
No, technology sort of has this idea when you go to conferences, you see people talk about using technology in the classroom and they always like to get everybody's mobile phones out and stuff. Technology doesn't necessarily mean electronics or something with wires and a battery inside it. I always stand by the most important piece of technology you have in a classroom is a pencil and a blank notebook to go with you. But today we're going to focus on things like smart boards, mobile phones, tablets, and I think you and me have a favourite, if I recall, is the little what do they call the little mini whiteboards that all kids get.
Mini whiteboards. Do we count that as technology, Alan?
It's something to put in the classroom, so yeah.
So tell me, why do you like the mini whiteboards so much, Alan?
There's so much variety you can have with mini whiteboards, and you can actually turn a dull writing or a dull sort of reading into some form of, basically like we were talking about last week, if you get the kids out of their book, or if you get their head out of their book, they're into it. So if you give them a board pen and a whiteboard, it doesn't matter what they have to write. They're going to do it, and they're going to be energized to do it.
And it also is amazing how the mini whiteboard, the mini whiteboard pen and mini whiteboard rubber transforms all students from like the 6 and 7-year-olds right up to adults. There's something exciting about being handed this little mini whiteboard that doesn't seem to fade. Like I thought this was like, I remember using them for the first time when I was teaching back in high school. I thought, oh, this excitement's going to fade after a short while. It really doesn't. Because it's different, I suppose. And again, maybe it's different to what they do in their schools here.
Well, when you think about it as well, it's not something you normally do anyway. Like, you don't go out, and unless your family are big into board games at Christmas, you don't really go out and buy these things. So it is a novelty for everybody, really.
True. And in some ways, actually, it's more novel than getting out their phones and playing a Kahoot quiz. Because they do that all the time, presumably in school as well, by the sounds of things. The other thing about mini whiteboards that I like is that there's a lot of engagement and a lot of activity on the side of the students. But also because we're teachers, we can be busy being crafty in how we're using them. So they can just be a tool for giving a bit more excitement to a standard, shall we call it, game. Like they can do Pictionary in their little teams rather than coming out with a big whiteboard. But also, something I've taken to adding a little bit of hilarity to the end of my sort of first or advanced or even proficiency classes. English is rich in animal expressions or animal idioms or metaphors, similes. So I just put them into pairs, give them a mini whiteboard, and give them a gapped expression where they have to pick an animal. I tell them what the expression means. And they have 2 points for choosing the correct animal and getting the correct expression. Or I'll give them a point if what they put either makes me laugh or makes sense. It's a game, it's fun, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything particularly profound, but if one or two of them take away one or two of those idioms that they can then throw into an article or they can throw into a speaking, then something effective has happened. And likewise, you can make a spelling test incredibly exciting. We're talking about sort of gamifying and taffling before, but the first person to correctly spell this word on the mini whiteboard gets a point. And then you've 10, 11-year-olds all racing to spell whichever the word is from that they have to know for the exam on a mini whiteboard and show it to you first. It's just much as you say, it's much more fun than writing it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's just engaging for, because even if you're doing a reading activity and then you take one question at a time, it's like, all right, the first people to find the answer, write it on the board and show me it, then you get a point. So everybody's reading the article faster than they've ever read it, which is really good for teaching gist, by the way, as well, if they're reading for gist. So I thought, yeah, that's really good fun.
Also, part 4 of the Cambridge First and Advanced and Proficiency exams where they have to do a sentence transformation, I find using a mini whiteboard very useful for that because it's less, when they're practicing it, especially if they're doing it, well, it doesn't matter if they're pairs or individuals, but they're committing less if they're writing with easily erasable things. They're much more free and happy to take risks and stuff. They can just wipe stuff out. But also, it's a lot easier for them to then show you their solution and they can see each other's solutions, and I can say, "Oh, two of these are right," and they can look around the room without it being written down in pencil in their book where no one else can see it, and they can't then learn from each other. So it's actually a very useful didactic tool in that context.
Yeah. So in reference to the electronics in the classroom, this year I am teaching in a place where I do not have smart boards, I don't have whiteboard, I basically have a whiteboard, a very low quality pen, and CDs. That's it. Whereas for the last 6 years, I have had projectors, smart boards, interactive whiteboards, DVDs, and the software on a computer. Now, my first year of teaching English was in the Islamic Centre in Belfast, so we did just have a flip chart, and that was it, and you make do. So this year has been quite interesting because I've had to go from grammar explanations on PowerPoint, which I've sort of made throughout the years, explaining different grammar points, and I write all over the PowerPoint because it's being projected on the screen. I'm not a big fan of interactive whiteboards. I really don't care for the interactivity thing. I prefer to get people writing on the boards, and it's more for show rather than actually making use of software and interactivity.
I agree, actually. I remember I started teaching in UK high schools when the interactive thing in high school really started. I mean, it had been really popular in primary schools before, but it was starting to really become a thing, and I started without one. And then for a couple of years, that's what I had. And the smart boards where you have the special pens that are not really pens, they are really difficult to write with. And actually giving the pens to kids, their handwriting looks really bad, and lots of them actually don't want to come up and write because it looks terrible.
But even doing little things like click and drag the answer from here to here, I mean, you have to reconfigure the connection every day, and it's so much more work. Whereas if you have a projector and you write over it like a normal board pen, if it's projected onto a normal board, it's perfectly easy and perfectly fine, and you just rub it out.
That's good. But also when it comes to clicking and dragging, wireless keyboards with a trackpad are fantastic.
Yeah, wireless keyboards have been because you can pass a keyboard around in class as well, so you can write extra things, which is also really good for lyrics training. If anybody's inclined to do that, yeah.
It's also good for when you're getting, if you've got the software on the board and the students are doing an activity in there, particularly in a workbook where it's 10, put this verb into the correct tense, and there are 10 kids in the class, you get them 30 seconds to get going and then start the keyboard going around the room, and they have to answer one of the questions out of the 10 on the screen. It actually livens up that dull 3 minutes where they're just heads in their books and there's a keyboard in my face, suddenly I've got to do something else, I've got to look up and re-engage with the world before I go back into my book. Now some might argue that it's distracting, but I would argue that often the grammar itself is not that difficult, and you are kind of revising or just going over something again, and actually it just gives it a bit more life.
Yeah. I think if you're it's 2019, if you're going to have one piece of electronic technology in the room, I actually think projector is the most important thing to have, because I've learned this year from having just a whiteboard and pen, it's not even that, I have a backlog of, PowerPoints that I've designed or stuff that I've designed or I show in class. It's not even that. It saves you so much time when you're explaining a grammar point, and if it's one of the complicated grammar points, you'd be there 10 minutes before class just writing away.
But also to be able to for sharing images, for sharing video clips.
Yeah, to have a culture, to give them a cultural interest in where you're from or what you do. Yeah, exactly. Because normally at the start of classes for like B2 and above, I like to sort of show them like little weird or quirky news clips from something back home. Like the killer whales off Kerry, or there's there's basking sharks off Cork or something. And normally when I had a projector and a computer, that would be the first sort of topic and discussion before class. Whereas this year it's like whiteboard, so I can't show anything. I can tell a story, but I can't show anything. So if you don't know what a basking shark is, it's like, well, that's kind of difficult. I kind of have to print one out and show everybody. It's not the same.
Well, no, it's not the same, and it's also quite wasteful. If we're going to be honest, I like the fact that, okay, there's electricity involved, and we can talk about the the eco-credentials of a projector in a different situation. But I think the cutting down on lots of bits of paper, which is actually afforded also by the mini whiteboards. If it's something that does not need to be something of record, then I much prefer them to use a mini whiteboard so that it's erasable, it's not wasted, and then the whiteboards go back in the box and we move on. I don't like, talking about technology, it can be anything. I don't like bits of paper. Like if it's something important, it needs to go in a notebook so it's valued. If it's not important, it goes on a mini whiteboard, gets erased, and you haven't got a waste paper basket full of paper at the end of the class. What do you think about, now here's a topic for discussion. What do you think about Kahoot, Quizlet, etc., etc., etc.? What's your take?
I think that's a good question. I think if you have... They're one of those things that when you go to conferences and when you go to certain academies and stuff, they have almost this worship for these things. I'm still not convinced. I love technology, and I'm a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I used to work in that sort of thing. I'm still not going to use them in the class. Sorry.
So have you never used them in the class?
I have used them in a class, but they become, unless it's a regular thing with a group of students you trust, so they have the Wi-Fi passwords and all that. There's two. I'm not bought over to that yet.
Just on that Wi-Fi passwords thing, I think there's a bit of an enfranchisement issue or a disenfranchisement issue here as well. And I wrote about this as part of for an assignment for my master's about technology in the classroom, that we can very quickly make assumptions about what our students have in their pockets, and this they might have all of these devices, but they might not have data, and they might not have much data, and they might not have data that they want to use in a class. And if you don't have Wi-Fi, for example, it might still be a wired connection where you work, or if your business, if your company, if your academy or institution doesn't want to give student access to the Wi-Fi for all sorts of obvious reasons, then you are in an awkward position if you're then asking students or obliging students to use their data to take part in the class activity. And I think maybe we'll talk about investment in emotion and engagement and stuff in a future podcast. But I think there's something there you can be very careful that you don't exclude students. And yeah, of course you can pair them up. And I've got a group of students that do like to do a Kahoot quiz, which, as we were talking last week, I don't let them do every single time. And actually, the more they ask for it, the less they do it. And there's usually a couple of them that don't have enough data left this month or whatever it might be. So, no problem, you can team up and do whatever. But I think that there's something in it that I do kind of think, I'm expecting them to have a device in their pocket. I'm expecting them... Well, actually, I'm not, as it happens, I'm thinking about it. But we're running a dangerous risk of expecting students to have all the technology in their pocket and that they're willing to use it in class.
Yeah, there's too many assumptions.
And you're making assumptions about data protection and and you're making assumptions about what the students or their parents might or may not consent to. Everything's getting connected up, and we don't really know what these companies are doing with that information. And I also think, again, we have to think also about safeguarding. And if you're taking students online in your classroom, even on their own devices, then you're responsible for their online behaviour for that 10-15 minutes, in a sense, because you've invited them to use that in the classroom, and actually you're not looking at their screens. You don't know what they are actually doing, and you don't know what they are actually doing. So I think there are issues. I don't think they're necessarily that it's the root of all evil, but I do think that there are things that we need to be aware of and consider before we ask students to take devices out of their pockets.
Especially a lot of them, especially now where sort of big data is a thing, if you've got to sign up, use an email, use a number, usernames and stuff, there's far too many assumptions involved in that. And then you've got sort of, especially if there's stuff like, instead of signing up with a new account, you sign up with a Gmail, you sign up with your Facebook account, then it's a whole different thing as well. I would need to be in an academy where I know that everybody has the Wi-Fi and everybody's, at least signed a thing saying, yes, I'm more than happy to use, this app. But I do think the best place I've seen them used, and maybe this is why it is sort of pushed so hard, you see it used a lot and advertised a lot in teaching conferences where they have worked well. I remember at TESOL, there was a global issues discussion given by Iruni Alorth, which I've probably mispronounced. She used Presentain, that's present, AIN at the end, for interactivity with what she was presenting. So after she gave a discussion on something, there would have been maybe you write a sentence and all the sentences appear on the board, or maybe you take part in a poll, which I think was very well done.
In that respect, it's similar in its lack of sign-up to something like Kahoot, whereby you don't need an account exactly, and then it kind of links you in that way. I thought it was very well done.
And it was done because everybody had the Wi-Fi as well.
But that's what we perhaps that's where this is a broader issue, and not one for the teachers, but one for the businesses, the academies, that actually we need to maybe be moving towards a sort of staff Wi-Fi, student Wi-Fi situation, where perhaps there's a student Wi-Fi provided, and maybe it's only on during business hours, and maybe it's heavily filtered, or whatever it might be, so that, or maybe it has a whitelist, so they can only use it to get to lyrics training and Kahoot and Presentate and whatever it might be. But that's not something for you and I, but I think that's something that perhaps for the future for academies to think about. I think the other danger we sometimes run as well is reliance on technology, and it fails. I remember going into work one day, and this is back in high school, and we had a power cut. No photocopying, no printing, no projectors, no computers. And if everything you rely on is electronic, then you're stuck. And obviously that's a very rare occurrence that you can't do anything like that, but it does happen. Or your whiteboard mid-lesson stops talking to your computer, or your projector bulb packs up mid-evening. I'm not saying we shouldn't have technology in the classroom, quite the opposite, but I think we need to be very careful we don't come to rely on things that are ultimately not that reliable, or that can let you down at the last minute. And sometimes, especially the newer, when they're in their first perhaps year of use, I don't mean by your particular institution, I mean in general, we can find problems within the smartboard software that comes with books. So I've been using a series this year for the first time. I'm not quite sure exactly how new it is, but it is very new. And there are quite a few of the listenings that simply don't work through the whiteboard, which is of course why you prepare your class beforehand and don't get stuck, and you realise, that one doesn't work. But nonetheless, you have to then be ready with the CD to play track 29 rather than pressing the button on the whiteboard. Ultimately, while these things are really useful and they're much more interactive, much more attractive, especially for the younger students, there can be problems within them, and you need to be prepared to deal with those problems as they arise.
Which brings us to one of the best and most useful pieces of technology I still find in the classroom is a pen or pencil, depending on your preference, and a notebook, which is one of those things I think with a textbook is something that everybody really should have in the classroom, regardless.
I think it's essential. I'd rather them have a notebook than a course book, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, it's a very good point. You tend to learn from writing things down anyway.
I think with the younger students, I think a notebook is useful because it makes, I think I mentioned this earlier on, it makes permanent, and it therefore makes it something that's worth valuing, and they take it more seriously. And the older students literally need it to have space to write, to have space to record vocabulary, phrasal verbs, do exercises, in a way and in a manner that makes sense, and again that gets valued. But you only have. I'm always amazed. You give little students a worksheet, and they've completed it, and then they either want it on the wall or in the bin.
Yeah, there's no other options. It's very binary, isn't it?
It's either something they're very pleased with, and they want to put it up on the wall and display it for all to see, or it's like, well, that can go in the bin now. Well, no, this is your work. It needs to go in your folder. No, I don't want this going in the bin. Whereas they put something in a notebook, and of course that doesn't happen. because it's in their notebook. And actually, again, the little people, when they've been asked to buy notebooks, are very keen to use them because they think it makes them feel very important that they're using their notebook in class.
Yeah.
And very grown up. Oh, we're doing this on our notebook. This must be important. And it is. It is important that they can use their notebook. But they feel that it's important. And they give it that little bit more sort of effort and priority and value, which means that maybe they'll remember it. Or at least know that they did it in a way that sometimes I think...
Yeah, they've something to look back on, and they've something to check, and they've something to show that, I have done that.
We were talking about progressing through the book as well. Oh, I've made some progress because here's something that I've done in my notebook that I couldn't do before. And I think evidencing to them that they've made progress and showing how what they do builds up is really important. I like to get my first certificate, so it's a B2 level, doing it's called brief writing. I give them 7 minutes and a title. And it's not, I don't want it planned, which is the opposite to what I usually ask for. I don't want it planned. I don't care what it is. It hasn't got to be a letter or any kind of genre. Just 7 minutes, my last holiday, go. And do this sort of once every month or every 6 weeks, just for 7 minutes at the beginning of a class, so that they can, by the end of the year, they can look back at how their writing has developed over the year, so they can see their own progress. But if they've no notebook, they can't do that.
Yeah, one of the things, speaking of which, from seeing their own progress I like doing, is writing the letter to students at the start of the year. And then their first homework is they write me a letter in response. And then at the end of the year again, you go, by the way, here's that letter. Do you remember that letter you gave me in September? Here it is back again. Correct it.
I'm actually looking at the folder on the other side of this room where I have the letters from my first certificates that they're going to be correcting next week.
It's so funny because they go, whoa, I did those mistakes. Like, yeah, you did. You don't do it anymore.
Yeah, you did. So that's off from the notebook, but the principle stays, so that you're trying to evidence progress and trying to evidence them so that they can see that they're improving over time.
No, that's what learning is. It's you need to see progression when you're learning something, and it's a big deal when you realize you've either filled a notebook or you've completed a book or you've read a novel, whatever, quantifiable. Yeah.
That you've gotten somewhere. Yeah, absolutely. Having said that, I'm not a massive fan of scraps of paper. The one time that I do like scraps of paper is piece of technology in the classroom, and that I've really embraced this year. It's very, very quintessential activity, the snowball fight. But that's one where I have found scraps of paper to be really useful. And whether you use it to, especially the lower teens, who also really like throwing paper around the classroom, but then using it as part of something bigger. So they write down their 2 truths and a lie, for example, using the target grammar. So maybe it's using can for ability. 2 truths and a lie, throw them around the classroom, then they all have a piece of paper each that they then unscrew, as it were, from being screwed up. And they have 2 truths and a lie using can, and then they have to find the owner of the piece of paper by asking questions using can. Can you? And then having returned the piece of paper, it then becomes the usual activity of 2 truths and a lie, where you have to guess by asking them questions. So that this one piece of paper becomes sort of 20 minutes of class, all practicing the same grammar point, without a textbook and without a notebook, actually, just a pencil piece of paper. So sometimes scrap paper in the classroom can be useful.
Yeah, there's a thing I do with the little tiny people when we're learning, usually at the start of a unit, when we're learning new vocabulary. So if it's, say, 10 new vocabulary words, we then play bingo, so they know to draw first to 6 on a page. So first the page becomes, it's writing practice for the new words. Then it becomes bingo, so you play 3 rounds of that, call out 6 words, whoever wins. And then it becomes a snowball fight. The snowball fight is more of a brain break for them. And then you open it and you go, okay, so you have to find who do you think it was. So you have to go around going, oh, is this your handwriting? Because I think you did this. Oh, you won bingo, so you did this. And then, because I have a recycling paper basket, it becomes a little, again, brain break, just all the teams for points, try and get, stand at the back of the room and throw it into the basket.
Score a basket.
Just a little brain break, and then that's it. They've done their vocabulary, they've had a wee run around, and then we're ready to do the next thing.
Are flashcards technology, Alan?
It's a form of technology, yeah. It's really underrated. Definitely for the young ones. There's so much you can do with flashcards. I think they're great.
Around the room, on the floor. I actually love teaching vocabulary to little people with flashcards because we have this moment at the beginning of the unit, like you just described, but I use flashcards and we sit in a circle. I do things like slow reveal, or Pelmanisms where they have to match the word card and the flashcard, or they're all face down and you have to say, okay, find me broccoli, and they turn over the spinach and they go, no, that's spinach. And again, it's something tactile. It's something. It is a technology because it's something that's not just them, I suppose. But it's a very basic one, and so wonderfully versatile. And I think that's something that as I progress in my teaching, I'm always looking for versatility. Fewer things with which I can do more.
Let's say if I can think of a dozen things I can do with this one item. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a great speaking activity for the students. By the way, the older ones. A dozen things you can do with a paperclip.
Yeah, which is great fun to do. Or how many uses you can do for an electrical socket or something.
So everyone knows lyrics training because you can get the keyboard out, pass it around, and they listen to songs that they already know. Type in the words that they already know before they hear them, and have a bit of a laugh. No, I joke. I actually quite like it, and it is they are listening to English, and it can be a bit of fun with a class at the end, and therefore it's enjoyable. And I think that's important in the class as well. If you sign up for an account with them, and we've just been discussing the problems of signing up for accounts, but you sign up for an account with them, you can get access to the lyrics for educational purposes, and you can make your own worksheets with them. You can make your own blanked out versions and play them the original song without it all on the screen, and they're following along, and they can do that. But the other reason I quite like it is pulling off the lyrics. And this is an activity that was suggested to me at a conference. I think it was AFIA last November down in Sevilla, and using the lyrics as the other half of a conversation. So students, the example that was given, and it is brilliant because Adele's songs are all brilliant for this. But hello, so you've the other side of the conversation. Hello, who is it? Or who's calling? It's me. What? Why are you calling me? Oh, I'm just calling to... and I've done it with B2 students, so this is preparing for the first. I've done it with...
oh, that's good, yeah.
Viva la vida. I used to rule the world. It's like, oh, what was it that you used to do? Oh, I used to rule the world. So they're practicing the question and answer formation, but actually, once they get past that very quick question and answer thing, you were surprised at how funny and how deep these things can get, actually. And because they get bored with the question and answer scenario, and they realise that they can actually be a bit more creative with their English. So again, I think it's one of those things where you can take a technology and you can look at it at lyrics training, they listen to it and they type in these words and then we move on, and it's a bit of fun at the end of the game, it's a bit of a treat, at the end of a lesson, and it's a bit of a treat. Yeah, but if you actually plunge beneath the surface with lyrics training, or you start thinking about how you can use lyrics differently in the classroom, it's not just a gap fill, it's not just I'll take out all of the past simples and then they're going to listen to it and write them in. You can go even further with it, and then you get them to perform it, and great fun.
One of the things that seems to be making a comeback, and quite expensively so, even though they're just pieces of wood, is Cuisinart rods seem to be making a comeback. Cuisinart rods, so the little different shapes of wood that are different colours. So my boss in Belfast, Arthur, would tell me these were used in the 1970s to teach mathematics, but are now coming back into fashion. And I've seen a lot more classes that now have them on the shelf, because you can do quite a lot. They're just little coloured sticks that are different sizes, and you can do quite a lot with them. One of the really cool ideas that I seen was if you're doing a reading or if you're doing any form of story, represent the story by creating shapes with these Cuisinart rods. So like you have to pretend some of them are people, or some of them are, whatever's in the story. So maybe there's a vehicle, or maybe there's a place or a mountain, whatever. But they seem to be coming back in fashion. Only this time they seem to be very, very expensive. I've seen Cuisinart rods going for 40 quid. It's like, Go to a charity shop and get them for €2. You know.
That reminds me of another little sort of game type thing, but again, dice. And you can get the specific conversation dice, where rather than having numbers, you have 6 sides and they're modes of transport, or they are animals, or they are places, or whatever it might be. And they have to get a set of dice together and make stories by rolling them. You're
talking about story cubes, yeah?
Story cubes. I think there are a number of different brands. I've heard them called talking dice, conversation dice.
I found a couple of boxes of story cubes in my academy here. I was very surprised to see they were from Belfast. It's like the only successful business ever to come out of Belfast. Most of our things end up in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Anyway.
Well, that's one famous example. But of course, you don't have to have expensive conversation dice to make that work. You can have a normal dice of 6. And this maybe what I would prefer to do is to actually elicit from the students 6 places, 6 animals, 6 verbs, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, get them to write it on the board.
Exactly, get them to come up with what each number on the dice represents. Give them the dice. Off they go, making up stories. And we're using the notebook again. What's the most important thing we're saying in the classroom, technology-wise, would actually just be the pencil and notebook.
And versatility for anything else you have.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Phrasally Verbocious. If you'd like to get in touch, you can tweet us
at PhrasallyV on Twitter.
You can email us
phrasallyverbocious@gmail.com.
You can check out our show notes online at
phrasallyverbociouspodcast.blogspot.com.
And please like, review and comment us on your podcast subscription service of choice. Goodbye.
Goodbye.